Hello? Hello? Should I just talk really loud?
I guess so.
I will do my best. Raise your hand if you can't hear me. So Letty had asked me to do a presentation on how I set up still lifes, and I hadn't ever really thought about how I set up a still life. So that was part of my challenge, was figuring out exactly what I did. And then it also occurred to me that when I started painting, initially I wanted to be a landscape painter. I didn't purchase still lifes. I didn't really care for still lifes. And I wanted to be a landscape painter. In the process, I took a class up in Santa Fe with Anita Louise West. And this was, I think, when Albert Handel and Anita were engaged. And so he came up, I was taking the class, and we were doing landscapes, and I was having a very hard time painting landscapes. So she had me come in, and she set me up with some peppers to paint. So I had some landscape paintings and my pepper painting as Albert Handel walked around, and he was doing free critiques. And he looked at my pepper painting, and he said, "You're really good at that. You should do more of that." And so, of course, I was like, "Oh my God, okay." So I decided at that point I would try more still lifes, and so that was one of my inspirations, or what led me to try still lifes more and embrace them more as a topic. I still, for several years, looked at them as a means to an end of being a landscape painter, but now I guess I'm a still life painter, so that's okay. So the topics I'm going to cover, I'm standing in, my inspirations, how I set up for traditional still lifes, some ideas for lighting, composition, reference photos, and then I included a lot of examples so that I can give you an idea. I can talk to my examples as to what my thought process was when I did the painting. So when it comes to inspiration, for me, it's a lot about flowers. I love flowers. I love fruits and vegetables. The colors. One thing that I started to realize with still life was that whereas the landscape, there was a lot of greens and blues, in the still life world, you could pick what color. Like if I wanted to paint pink, I could go buy some pink flowers. And so that was something that I found very appealing with painting still lifes. Another thing that inspires me is if I see mundane things, I like to try to make them special. Or finding, somebody had mentioned it to me, I think one of my pumpkin paintings, they had said, "Oh, I love how you find the wonder in the mundane." So that's something I'm always looking for. I also like to try to do still lifes in a landscape setting. So I almost get the landscape, but I still have my little still life there. And another thing that I like to include in my still lifes are surprises, like reflections. And one thing that I had been looking at paintings from, I think it was the Dutch Renaissance painters, and I noticed it was a painting of a couple, and the woman was pregnant, but in the middle there was a mirror. And the mirror, very small, was the reflection of the painter in the painting. And I thought that was cool. And I thought, since I like to paint silver, I could put the reflection of myself in the, but I don't, I'm just like a black smudge on the pot. But so those are a lot of the things that inspire me. And then the more that I paint those things, the more inspired I get. Do I need to move this?
Yes, if you can.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Art training.
So I paint a lot of sunflowers, flowers in general. I like teacups. I'm very excited. I found out this week that we're moving my dad into a retirement apartment, and it turns out in his basement he had all these boxes of teacups. There'll be some more teacup paintings coming for me. And the thing I like about teacups is there's a lot of variety in the shapes, and it's always fun to see, can I make it look like, can I get the teacup to look like the real thing? And then I enjoy painting glass and silver. I had already mentioned the reflections. Capturing the light. When I first started painting, and this was when I was painting the landscapes, it never looked like there was sunlight. And it was very frustrating to me because I couldn't figure out how to give the appearance of the light. And so one thing that's I always enjoy as a challenge is trying to give the feel of the light or the light source in the painting. And then also, I'm never quite happy. There's some paintings where I've been like, oh my gosh, I really love that. But a lot of times I look at a painting and I say, oh, I think I can do that better the next time. And so some of it is a process of just trying to continuously improve. And that's where painting things a lot, the same things over and over again, has really helped me get better at some of my painting. So the next slide is a picture of the setup in my studio. It's very high tech, as you can see. Could you get me a cleaner? It's very high tech. I have this table, which is actually my great-grandparents' table that they had in their cabin in northern Minnesota. So it's an antique table. And then on top of that, I have a bench. And the reason that I put the bench on the table is so that when I'm standing up, this is about at my eye level. And if I want to do a painting on that table, I actually have some another very high-tech solution. I have some plastic bins from Lowe's that I put under that, and I raise it up that way. But this way, if I'm sitting, I can see the table at eye level, or if I'm standing, I can see it's at eye level where I want it to be. And then off to the right, you can see my photography light. That is adjustable. I can move it up and down so I can, and I put a spotlight in it, not a floodlight, so it has a spotlight. I have both, but I usually use the spotlight. I have a very high-tech way of hanging my tablecloths. This is a tablecloth. I use thumbtacks. So And I just put them right in the wall. So eventually, maybe I can put up a cork board or something, but I'm going to dispel any suggestion that I have anything special that I do that you can't do. You can do all of this. In my studio off to that side is our 3 windows that face north. So I'll get the blue light or the cool light from the windows. I also have track lighting that I can use instead of the photography light, but those lights are harder to move around. So lately I've been enjoying this spotlight so that or the photography light, so I can move it around and position it at any angle that I want or any level that I want. In case you're wondering, this is a big TV that we took to my son, so I don't have the big TV there anymore. So this is an example of how, this is a picture of how I might set up a still life. You can see I've pinned the backdrop onto the wall, and then I've set up my flowers. For people who took the August workshop, these are the flowers from the workshop. So if they look familiar, these are also the bottles that I brought to the workshop. Do they look familiar? So this is an example of how I might set it up. And then, so that's
Sarah,
what, yeah?
Do you always work from real flowers?
Yes, I do have a lot of silk flowers, and I have used those, but generally I like to work from real flowers. So this slide is considerations for a still life. So these are the things that I think about when I'm setting up my still life. And I had to, some of this I had kind of a rule for it. Other things I just, it's more what my gut is telling me. I do like to have a variety of shapes and sizes, and so this is an example. Let's see if I can get this to work. This is an example where you'll notice all the vases and the glass are different sizes and different shapes. I generally like to have an odd number of objects, but not always. But that's helpful to have an odd number. I try to have color harmony. Now this is where I ran through this presentation with my dad, who's 85, and he said, "What do you mean by color harmony?" And I realized I don't really know what I mean. To me, it's color, and so what I told him was it's the colors that I think go together well, and one of those that I like is the yellows and blues. And so I'll tend to have, like in this one has a lot of yellows and blues with some, yes?
We have a question from the Zoom meeting from Gary. Sarah, what surface do you paint on, and what pastels are your favorite?
So real quick aside for Gary on Zoom, I use UArt 400 primarily, and my favorite pastels are, I like the Holbein, Giroux, Terry Ludwig's, well now I'm practically naming all of them, and Unison. The ones I use the most are probably the Terry Ludwig's, the Unison, and the Holbein. So color harmony to me, I don't have a real set rule on it. It's mostly things that I think, go well together. And I'm sure there's some, like, rules behind it, but I don't really know what those are. Composition, I spend a lot of time on my composition, and what I'm trying to do with the composition is move the viewer's eye around. I'm not going to show you on this setup, but on some of the other examples I have, I'll show you how I was very deliberate in where I put things to help move your eye around. Perspective was especially important for me in the beginning. If you'll notice, this is a side-on view for the still life, and that made it easier for me to do the drawing. I have since graduated from always doing side-on views. I've tried different things, but in the beginning, and I would suggest this if you're just starting out on still life, that having a side view makes it easier to draw. And I'll point out, like this bottle here, it's a lot easier to draw from this perspective than if I'm trying to look down on it or look up at it.
Sarah, what makes you decide if you're going to stand and have it at eye level standing or sitting?
Whether my feet hurt. No, for a long time, or for several years, my feet were hurting, so I sat down. I prefer to paint standing up if I can. So it just depends. If I'm tired, I'll set up something so I can sit down. I don't think there's really anything magical about it.
Why do you prefer standing up?
Because I like to back away, so I can back away frequently from what I'm painting, and that's easier. Although I did start using a chair with wheels when my feet were hurting, it actually was pretty fun. I could just push up, and then I'd end up a little ways away, and then I kind of do the little. Use my feet to get back. Yes, Marilyn?
Since you use live flowers, do you finish it within the life of the flowers?
So I'll talk about that some in a little bit, but that's one reason I take a lot of photos, because while still life doesn't change as much as the when you're out on trying to paint from life outside, the flowers do move. If you've ever tried to paint tulips, they have a life of their own. So you have to capture those quickly if you want to have them in a certain spot. So what I was trying to do for my presentation today is walk you through some examples of some paintings that I tried to do the last couple weeks. And so I had all these flowers from, put this on the floor. I had all these flowers from the workshop that I thought were really pretty. And especially the sunflowers I thought were really pretty. So what I just started, I put the flowers out there. I thought I'll try my turquoise cloth. Then I start taking a lot of photos, and I look at the thumbnails of those photos on my computer, and something will start to pop up as to, oh, I like that value composition. So it's kind of like a no-tan that you can do the sketches, but it's a very small version on your computer. And then if I find some ideas that I like, I'll start editing those photos to the standard frame sizes. for these types of still lifes, I follow the rule, I think it's called the rule of thirds. Y'all are familiar with that. My 85-year-old dad was like, what do you mean? So I had to draw him a picture. But I told him I was sure that the people, my audience today would know what the rule of thirds was. What brought me to the party? That's a question I kind of keep in my mind when I paint a still life. And in this case, it was definitely the sunflowers. That was kind of what was leading me to do this setup. And then I have a note in here that I'll move the light around. I'll put it higher and lower. I spend a lot of time on this step trying to figure out what my composition is going to be.
We
Yes?
have another question from, and it would, how long do you typically spend on each painting? Do you schedule rest periods during painting sessions?
So these paintings that I did for the example, each took me a couple days. I probably spend an hour or two just setting it up and figuring out my composition. And then I take frequent breaks because I have to reset my eyeballs. If I'm painting for too long in a row, I get I can't see it for what it is. So I'll have to set it aside and go do something else for a while. So when I was working on this as my start, to me, this seemed too busy. And that was I just went, that's too much stuff. And there was, so I made a lot of changes to this. I wanted to also point out that this is an example where I had moved the light lower. So if I go back to the previous, so in this one you see this is all light up here because the light is up near the ceiling. But then on this one I have moved the light down and it makes for a little more drama with the shadow. So I experiment with all of that.
What camera do you use?
My phone. It's some very fancy camera that I can't tell you about. What I'm going to do real quick now is just give you a short example on a few slides of different lighting. And this, so I'm kind of we're going to take a little detour here and look at, so we're going to look at the evolution of this painting, the rose painting, just to give you an idea of where I went with the lighting. So I had seen these flowers at Trader Joe's, which is a place I go to a lot for flowers. And I wanted to paint them, but I didn't want it to be really boring, but how was I going to not make it boring? And so I set it, but I wanted it to be simple because I had to get it done in time for today. So I set this up. I like the idea of the pink with the greens. The light is a full light source up high, so you can see what that looks like. And I could have painted that, but that didn't really get me excited. So I moved the light down, so now I have the light source at the side, and I was still the flowers were starting to get a little old, and I was still not very inspired to paint this. It was just okay. So then I had this idea to limit my light source and just have it be highlighting a couple of the flowers and have the rest of it in shadow. And when I got to this, I went, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, that's different. That's not just the vase with the flowers with all the light on it. So this is how I achieved that. Again, a very high-tech solution where I took a piece of cardboard that I got from paper I had bought, and I just cut a square in it, like a little window, and I have my light source, over here. So it's creating I don't have a window like that. I wish I had a window like that I could use. But I've done things like this before where maybe I don't cut the cardboard, I cut a little square out of the cardboard, but I will cut the cardboard off like in the middle, so part of the still life is in shade and part of it is in the light, just to make it more interesting. So what this is, what I ended up with, and I brought the real thing because I didn't like how the picture came out, but basically I just thought it was a little more fun to have just the light on here and trying to capture the feeling of the light source on just part of the still life. So that's enough with our detour. And you can come up and look at the painting.
Was that a dark surface you painted on, or was it just?
Yeah, this is UArt dark board. So I got a new phone, and my camera, I'm having trouble adjusting to the new camera. I don't know exactly how to get it to do what I want to do, but so that was just an example to show you how you can be a little creative with your lighting. So let's go back to my previous example where I had all the flowers from the workshop. If you recall, I had all the flowers up and I had the shadow of the flowers on the background. I decided I didn't really want to have all that going on, so I moved my little bench forward and that took out the shadows. So I had this new idea that looked more like that. And you can see where the light is there. So now I have something that looks more like this as an option. And all of these things, I have one of those viewfinders that has the lines drawn on it. And I'll use that. I also look in Photoshop. You can see the grid. You see the grid lines on there? Because what I'm trying to do is make sure that my points of interest line up with the rule of thirds as much as possible. I don't always do that, but I do try to follow that somewhat. So what I'm thinking about here, when I looked at this picture, I thought, there's too many sunflowers. I didn't like the vase placement, that wasn't, I didn't like that. And I also, while I think this blue vase is cool, I just didn't like it for this composition. I put some other notes on this slide. I like to paint things either the same like life size or smaller. I don't like to paint things bigger than life. I wish I could. I don't know why, but they just never look very good. So I will measure, like I have a ruler that I'll measure across here to give myself an idea of, okay, it's approximately, when I measured this one, it was approximately 16 by 20. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be working probably 16 by 20 size or smaller. So probably an hour later, I came up with this. So this is just to show you, I went through all these revisions. I actually decided to buy some additional pink flowers because I wasn't, the flowers from the class were getting a bit droopy by this point, and I thought I need something that's a little, it's a different shape than the sunflowers and the carnations, but it could fit in. So I'm getting closer to something that I like. I already had mentioned that I'm working towards the 16 by 20 size. With that setup, I noticed that I didn't like how on this one the cloth didn't touch the edge. This to me just felt uncomfortable. And I decided I was going to move this vase back to balance out this better, but I'm really close at this point. So I get to this point. This is after I had taken multiple pictures and moved things around. And if you remember from one of my earlier slides, I like this. I have an odd number of objects. I have a variety in shapes and sizes. These, I have a variety here, and then I have a variety in my flowers. And I liked how the objects were vivid and the background was more subtle in color. While I wanted it to really highlight the sunflowers, they're not overwhelming. And then if you look at how I followed the rule of thirds, I have this place here where there's a light, probably the lightest light and darkest dark next to each other. So I'm thinking the person, the viewer would see this sunflower and then travel around the painting like this. And I have this little petal here that helps you, and the stems that helps you go back up to here. So that's what I'm thinking anyway. I don't know if people actually look at it that way. But, so this is how it's set up in my studio. So I have my easel here and my subject here. This was stuff I experimented with and forgot to move out of the picture. And you can see my photography light is here. So this is while I'm painting. Just to give you an idea. Probably the next day, I'm still painting.
Are you only using the colors from that box?
Oh, so no, I have a lot more pastels. This is a box that I'm putting together to do sunflowers. I plan to take this up to the Terry Ludwig store up in Littleton, Colorado. Now that my son moved there, so I have an excuse to go there, and I'm going to try to pick out all Terry Ladwick pastels and make myself a. So this is just for the sunflowers, and then I have a picture, another picture later where you can see where my. This is all like all down in here is pastels, and on the other side is pastels, and then I have like 6 drawers of pastels. So I came up. This is the painting I ended up with, which is right here. And I did make some minor composition adjustments as I went along. I wanted the flowers to touch the edges a little bit. I made this this was rather thin in reality, so I filled it out with some more petals. I added a lower edge to this sunflower that I couldn't see. And then I put some little spots of light on the petals on this sunflower, just so it could feel included. And I had already mentioned that. And at first I didn't put all these little petals that had fallen off in the painting, but then I decided that I kind of liked the idea of that one petal pointing up. So the better picture, you can see it here if you're interested at the break. So that was one of the paintings I did. And then I have another setup that I did. This was way simpler. I did this one for the class, the workshop. The idea being I had my main point of interest with the dark next to the light, and then I had the secondary point of interest. And then down in here, I thought I just love having being able to see and try to render the stems in the water. So this one, now you can see all my, and I would not use, I don't think I'm a good example of how to organize your pastels. This is some Holbein pastels. This is all my Jack Richardson pastels. And then this is a box that I'm always intending to go landscape painting, but I never go landscape painting, so I use it like that. And like I mentioned before, this over here is the box of colors that I'm putting together for sunflowers. That way when I paint sunflowers, which I love to paint sunflowers, they're all readily available. So that's the painting that I came up with, and it's down here. So I had mentioned before some, and I wanted to just touch on it again, additional considerations. Perspective. In the beginning, I kept the perspective really easy because then I could really focus on trying to get the colors and the lighting correct. So it made it easier for me to start with a simple perspective. I learned this the hard way. A better composition makes the painting part easier. If I spend a lot of time working on my composition up front, then I'm not trying to erase things and fix things when I'm painting them. So I spend a lot of time on my compositions, because then I don't have to make hardly any corrections when I do the painting. I take a lot of digital photos, this back to Marilyn's question about working with real flowers. They do die, they get stinky and lose their petals. And so I always start with the real thing, but if I haven't been able to finish it, I at least have a photo I can work off of to help me finish it. I crop the photos to the frame sizes that I want to use. And then sometimes I've done this with my photos, and I have some examples at the end where I've added flowers. Like I'll have a bouquet and I really like this one composition, but it's missing one little thing. And my husband knows this because I've made him print out multiple copies of the photo, and then I'll cut out the one flower and paste it on the photo. So that's another very high-tech way that I work. The photos really help me with the placement on the paper. When I first started painting, sometimes I would start drawing, and I'd end up where I had an idea of what I wanted the edges of the painting to be, but I'd get things too wide, and then I'd be drawing off the edge of the paper. So with the photo, I can figure out where the edges are. Like where's the vase has to fit in here. This is the top, this is the bottom, and then I can worry about filling in the shapes later. So this is, I'm sorry, Jim. When the house across the street went up for sale, I was like, we could buy that house and I could put all my still life stuff in. You collect a lot of knickknacks, and I borrow a lot of things too. So I was going to show you some of my, here's some of my bins of cloth and some of my things I've collected. So these I have worked off of silk roses in the past, especially when I was first trying to do roses. I still try to do, like I'll use these, but I try more to use the real thing. Some more. This is in my studio. These are my bottle collections, and it's funny when you do a lot of paintings with bottles, people will tell you, "Oh, I'm getting rid of stuff. You want my bottles?" Okay, so I have gotten, people will just donate to me their blue bottles. Now I have, if you decide you want to be a still life painter, I have, so this is a secret way to disguise your obsession with all your still life things, because you can't tell. There's little vases in here, and bottles, and they're all camouflaged, so you can't tell they're there. See all this down here. So it's like a surprise. You think it's a bookshelf, and then you realize, oh, it's got a bunch of still life stuff in it.
Are those the peppers that you did?
No, those were peppers I probably did when I got home. I did a lot of peppers. So now what I'm going to do is show you some examples of a variety of different kind of still lifes that I've done. Starting with what I consider the traditional still lifes. So you'll notice, and this is the one I have in the Pastel Society of America show. this year. Again, you'll notice this is a side-on view. I got this pot at Pier 1. It's one of my favorite pots to paint. I painted that one a lot. In this example, I painted this twice, so the second time I painted it from the photo. In the bouquet, these two flowers weren't there. There was just a big, like stems and stuff. And what it felt like to me, so the first time I painted, it hadn't occurred to me that I could add stuff that wasn't in the still life. Who would have thought, as the artist, I could actually edit things. So the first time I painted it, these weren't there, and I felt like, okay, your eye went around like this, and then it fell in a black hole right here. So I realized, I could just add some flowers. So since I had gotten better at painting sunflowers when I tried this one again, because I loved this idea and the colors and all that, but I didn't like this hole that I had here. So I had gotten better at painting sunflowers, so I just used examples from other still lifes to kind of fill in there. And I like this idea of this one draping over to kind of connect it down to the bottom part of the still life. And I also, if you notice, I do this a lot. I don't remember who had, where I had initially heard this, but I like to connect my flowers to the edges a lot. I don't do it all the time, but I do it frequently. This is another way you can look at traditional still lifes. So this was from a while ago. It's still a side-on perspective, but instead of having the horizon, I guess you could say, down here, I moved it up so that I could practice doing the cloth. And you'll see this cloth many times in some of my examples. I use this tea cloth a lot of times. In this one, I also was intentionally trying to do a red and green color scheme, and that's all I had to say about that one. This one, there was a period of time where I did a lot of these, where the cloth, there was a lot of emphasis on the cloth. This time the light is kind of coming in at a horizontal, and the rule, I used that rule of thirds, and so I thought I was very clever with this. So this was very intentionally thought out. I put a fold in the cloth right here to kind of help point up to here to go around, and then you slide down this wrinkle and you go back. I thought it was rather fun, but when you look at it, you don't think, oh, that was intentional, but I really did. That was I don't do this all the time, but there's sometimes when I have something very intentional that I want to do. So my teacup paintings, I included this because this is an example where the light source was way back over here, and it was a little like spotlight that I had put on the table. I moved it around a lot trying to figure out how I wanted to do this, because I wanted to get the reflection of the teacup in the silver. So that was you have to have the light on the teacup so that it reflects, if you want it to show up. The other thing to notice here is it's more of an aerial perspective. I also thought it was fun. This was a little bit different because most of it is in the shadow. Most of the things to look at are in the shadow. And this is what I was telling you earlier about the surprise of the reflection. And also, when you saw this painting from like 10 or 15 feet away, you didn't see the musical notes that when you got closer. So I thought that was kind of fun, that people could go, oh, look, it's not just paper, it's music. So that was that painting. This painting was another painting where, in this case, I had a very strong light source coming from right over here, and I also had my windows in my studio reflecting in here, so that made for a really nice reflection. And then I had the reflections of the things on the table, so I thought that was fun. And then it's just always fun to try to get the teacup to look like porcelain. Another teacup painting, you'll notice I put this on the 1/3 line here. I intentionally connected this to this side of the paper because they're like balancing precariously, and I thought at least I anchored it so people might not be quite so concerned about it falling over. So I just love this painting. I thought the red was kind of an interest. It was just something I tried. I thought, I'll try red in the background, and I thought it worked kind of well. This is a very small painting. Looks a little funny that big. A 6x8 painting. And this one just shows you that sometimes you can just do really simple things and they kind of are fun. This was extreme aerial perspective, and I had so I put this in where the thirds cross, right? That's right there. And then I positioned the spoon so it's pointing back to the coffee cup. Oh, and do you recognize the cloth? Here I'm going to show you an example. Don't worry, I'm almost done. There's a kind of, I think they're called garden roses from Trader Joe's. They last forever. Like you can paint them for a week and a half and they look the same. And so I think it was last year I did these paintings. I had this, so they're kind of orange with yellow on the outside. So the first time I painted it, I had this very traditional setup, and again, note that like I usually do, I have an odd number of vases, and they're different shapes. And I put this is the rule of thirds. And so I got this painted, and I thought, oh, well, that's kind of nice. And my flowers were still alive, so I thought, I'm going to try something really different. So the next one, this one, I tried the light coming from behind, so I think that back or rim lighting, and I did not use an odd number of things because I only have two, but they're different size and shape. And I'm still using the rule of thirds. I think this one was right where the third line connects. But it gave me a chance to do the rim lighting and the feel of the light coming through the petals. I also thought this was kind of fun because you could see the way the light comes through the glass. I thought was really interesting. And then I did another painting. And so I got more extreme as I went on, I guess. So this was the third painting I did with those roses. This time the light is over here, but it's an aerial perspective, obviously. So, and then this flower is at where the third lines cross. And you recognize the cloth, right?
Get tired of painting the same cloth over.
No. So I like to do this. I have some examples now of the hybrid still lifes where I'm mixing the still life with the landscape. So what I've done is I did, actually, to answer your question, Nicholas, I did get bored of doing stuff inside. So I thought, well, maybe I can put a still life outside and then paint the backdrop as a landscape. I thought the interesting thing, I've sold all the paintings almost that I've done this way, and I kind of think that's a way, it's because there's people who don't really like still life paintings, but if you put it out in a landscape, they're like, oh, okay, I can take that.
Congratulations. Good idea.
And for these, I work off of photos, but the thing I will say is I can work off of the photos because I've painted so many of these flowers and this jar inside. So this is one example. This is an example. I think this was in this year's Enchanted Colors show. I was trying dappled light this time. And oh, this is an example where I worked from multiple photographs. And the photo that I primarily worked off of, there was no sunflower here. So I took this sunflower from a different picture and cut it out and taped it on the photo to work from. Because I liked the shape of that one, but it needed something there. Otherwise, it was just empty space there. Well, it was like the back of the other sunflower. This is the wall outside my front door. And so if I have questions about, like, what does that look like when the sunlight is shining on it, I can just run out my front door and kind of evaluate it. The last section I have is on what I call my found still lifes. So I joke, these are still lifes I found just walking around. So this one I had in Masterworks this year, and it's a from a photo I took when I went to Trader Joe's one time. I had actually driven by Trader Joe's earlier in the week and had thought, oh, they have all their pumpkins out. I have to get over there and take some pictures. But by the time I got there, most of the pumpkins were gone, and this is what was left. But when I looked in the box, I just had showed up at the exact right time because the lighting was perfect. Everything was, at least I thought, you had this really great still life setup just for me in the box.
Won the top award.
Yeah, that was very nice. And I actually won an award. I think I got second place in the still life category in the Pastel Journal as well. I can paint pumpkins from pictures because I've painted a lot of pumpkins from real life, so I know how to interpret the pictures. So that's one thing to keep in mind. This was a very challenging perspective for me because the box was all crumpled up, and so I had to fix stuff and make stuff up. So it was kind of challenging. But I'm really happy with how this one turned out. I find things at the grocery store. The thing that drew me to these carrots was the purple ties. I thought, how cool is that? How did they know to do that? So I worked off a photo for this, and my kids were constantly embarrassed in the store when I would be photographing things in the produce department. To go with the carrot, I needed a painting to go with the carrot painting. So these were golden beets at Smith's, and this time, since I had seen the purple ties, in the picture they were white, but I knew I could change them to purple to go, with the carrots. I think Jenny saw this one at my house. These are in my kitchen. And then I had this one. Again, the ties weren't purple, they were white. But I found this at Whole Foods and thought this was kind of a fun scene. I did notice after I had taken the photo in the produce department at Whole Foods, the next time I went in, they had a sign that said no photography. I wasn't, I just it's very, this was another painting I did at Whole Foods. This was the one on Wyoming, and I walked up to the front door and went, oh my gosh, how they have all the chrysanthemums on display? And so the thing that I thought was interesting was how the light came through the little lattice canopy that they had. And I also liked that in the windows in the front, in the door, it reflected the Sandia Mountains, so I thought that was kind of a little surprise how I could include that. And then my last slide, this one was one that when Ian was in 6th or 7th grade, I spent a lot of time at the nurse's office at school. And right outside the nurse's office, they had sunflowers. And I thought it was so fun how they had planted these morning glories and how they just all grew together. So I took several pictures. And this was a big paint, well, for me it was big, 24 by 30. So that's my last slide. I hope you learned something. I'm not sure. These are the examples that I did for today, and then some other examples that I brought. So that's all I have. Thank you.